Hi, everybody. Welcome to another episode of Fantasy Book Critics video interview series, authors and their favorite books. I'm Mihir Wanchoo, and joining me today is Krystle Matar, a debutant author from last year and current SPFPO finalist. We have reviewed her debut title, Legacy of the Brightwash, but today she's here to talk about one specific and special book to her and a special author as well. So Krystle, do you want to take the stage?
Thank you very much for having me on. Like you said, my debut, Legacy of the Brightwash, came out at the beginning of last year, so it's only just a year old now, and it's really connecting to people in the most amazing way, and I'm so incredibly grateful for the writing community to be as supportive as they has been. Not sure what else to say, really. SPFPO is almost done, so we'll have some results soon and on to more books.
Yay. And I believe it'll, when this airs, there will be just about over less than 5 weeks to go. And I believe your book is currently in the top 3 or top 4.
Top 3, yeah.
Top 3, yes. There might be a few more ratings that will be coming in, so we don't know how it'll end.
Yeah, it's impossible to predict. I've watched enough SPFPOs to know that it's anyone's game right now.
Well, according to Michael R. Fletcher, he is hard to, he announced it beforehand. I remember him announcing even before the competition started, that yours was a title to watch out for. I know,
yeah.
It has connected, like you mentioned, with a lot of people, and they really enjoyed it. I particularly enjoyed it as well.
Thank you.
So it's going to be fascinating to watch what happens and how it ends. But nevertheless, you have made it. It's I feel like it's like a special thing to be a SPFPO finalist, because amongst yours is, has been acclaimed to be, or at least adjudicated to be a good one, if not a great one. So kudos.
Yeah, thank you very much. Definitely being a finalist feels like the prize, and then however we place it's almost besides the point, just because being part of the SPFPO crowd is just so supportive, and we get a lot of exposure, and it's just the finalist is the prize, and then now we're just having all the reviews that help.
Well, like I said, I'm going to keep my fingers crossed, and I'm going to be excited.
Thank you.
Happens all the way to the end. All right, so I do want to ask you, can you tell our viewers what is the title that you selected, and why, and what makes it such a favorite of yours?
Well, when you approached me, I knew immediately that the answer had to be David Gemmell. And then beyond that, it was just narrowing down which one was my favorite. And I think, once again, the obvious answer was Stormrider, which is the 4th novel in Gemmell's Rigante series. But all of those books stand alone very well. They each contain their own story. In fact, I think that can be said about all of his novels, where he's just brilliant about writing a series that has each book has its own story that you can jump in at any point. So whatever you happen to pick up at the time is a great place to start. But Stormrider is it's the book that changed storytelling for me, and it's the book that made it so that I wanted to do this. This needed to be part of who I was. I wanted to be a storyteller. I wanted to publish novels, and I wanted to make people, if one person felt about my world the way I felt about his, I would consider myself a success. And Stormrider was the one that hooked me like that. It's not the first book I read, but it's the one that impacted me the most. And he's got a lot to choose from, so that says a lot.
Yes, he definitely does.
About 30 books or so, I think, Or
Yep, you're right.
Yeah.
There's about close to 12 in the Drenai series, 4 in the series. There's a bunch of standalones. The John Shannon series. Then there's which kind of the Ghost of Power books, which is a duology. And
there's another duology too. I can't remember the name of it now, but
yes, the Greek ones, the Parmen ones. And then there's the sequel which stars Alexander, but it's not Alexander. It's Alexander the fantasy version. Yeah,
and the Troy series, of course.
Yes. I have those in hardcover just sitting over there. That is his, I believe that was his magnum opus, even though he probably did not intend it to be his magnum opus, but it kind of, in a very bittersweet way, being his magnum opus.
I think it was. I think I remember seeing an article or an interview from him that he's always wanted to tell that story.
Mm-hmm.
And when he started as an author, he didn't feel like he had the skills to tell it yet. And so it was always a project that he was researching through his entire career. And then finally at the end he started it. I'm gonna get emotional already. But he started it, and he passed away before the third one was finished, and his wife finished it for him. And what an incredible legacy to leave, you know. So yeah, it was always meant to be his special gem.
It was. I can only tell you because I remember this was when I was back in India, and I remember reading the first two books, and I was waiting for the third book, and then all of a sudden I read online that he passed away. It was a shock. Like I'm pretty sure you must have felt the same even when you first heard about it. It was such a huge shock. And then I remember later on the news came that his wife Stella Gemmell, for whom I am eternally grateful for doing this, because she had mentioned that there was like a part of it or portion of it he had completed. But then it was his extensive, she had done the research for him. She could step in and she wrote what I believe is to be a seamless book. You cannot tell who wrote.
You can't tell. There's no transition in voice. Like it's
beautiful.
I don't know how far along it was before she took over, but certainly she was, she carried it, past the goalpost for him. And I actually found out when I bought the book, because it says in the front of the book that
David and Stella Gemmell
passed away, and she finished the book. And I remember I bought it as soon as it came out, and I read that opening, and I had to put it away, and I had to leave it for almost a year before I was ready, just with the realization that this was going to be it. But recently, or I guess not that recently, about 5 or 6 years ago, my husband tracked down Rhyming Rings, and what's the other one
White
called?
Knight, Black Swan.
That's right. I guess Galans.
Yes.
Galans? I'm not sure how that's pronounced. They republished it. Galans, They published them under his name, and he tracked those down for me. So that was really emotional as well, even though they weren't fantasy novels. It was just the last time I would get new David Gemmell novels. So that was.
Well, I might have a teensy bit of surprise for you in that regards.
Oh,
you're right about that. Like, I believe White Knight, Black Swan was actually previously published, under a different pseudonym.
Under a different name.
And it was so hard to find. I could not find it at all. And then you're right, because Rhyming Rings was another, it's about a reporter set in, not in London, but like in the UK.
London, I think.
Yeah. And then those two novels republished. So I was very happy as well, because it's like, David Gemmell, even if they're a year, they're years late, I'll still take them.
Absolutely.
I don't know if you know this. So a few years ago, see, this is what we were just talking about. It seems like around the 5th anniversary of his, the 5th anniversary of his passing away, we actually at Fantasy Book Critic found an excerpt which was previously unpublished.
Oh.
It is, and I'll link it over here in the about description, and I'll send it to you as well. Basically, it's a scene from one of the from the First Chronicles of Bruce the Legend. And Bruce's wedding, which has never been seen in the book. The begins. It's he's already married to Rowena, but so I discovered this excerpt in like a small Games Master magazine from 1990s, and we actually contacted his agent and his his widow, and they gave us the okay to kind of post it online. So we actually have still to this day.
Oh my gosh!
Page. So I don't know if you haven't read it. It's 3 more pages of David Gemmell. Okay, wonderful. Well, it's 3 pages of David Gemmell's writing.
And very emotional. Wow.
You get to see Bruce as a young lad his father and Bress and him are talking and about his upcoming nuptials, and you can see like the latter 2 pages are like almost like a prototype version of the scene which you actually see within the books of First Chronicles, but it's 5 pages of At least for me, at that time, it was like
New words.
new words of David Gemmell, which I would never find again. So.
Oh, that's amazing. That's really cool. I did not know that you had that.
We got lucky. I got really lucky, and I was able. And to be honest, it's all thanks to David's literary agent and his widow, who actually gave us the okay to even post.
Yeah.
Because I didn't want it to be like just with me. I wanted to be like everybody else at least could read something.
Yeah, that's really special.
All right, so I wanted to ask you this. Obviously you said that you had read some of other David's books before Stormrider. What was your introduction to him? Like, what was the first book that turned you on to his writing?
The first book, well, the first book was Stormrider. I saw it in the this is a big long circle of a story, but I saw Stormrider in the bookshop or in the bookstore. I guess it had just been published, so it was in the trade paperback format, so the large size but soft cover. And they had the cover facing out and everything because it was brand new. And I just I still remember the emotion of just being drawn to that cover. And I was asking my grandmother for it, but it was because it was trade paperback size. She was like, well, you've never read this writer before, so why don't we make sure you actually like him before we sink whatever it was, $20 into a book. And so the only other book they had on the shelf was the same series. It was Midnight Falcon, which is the second.
Yep.
The second in that same series. So it was like, okay, fine, I'll not my money, so not my choice. So I'll settle for Midnight Falcon. And I started reading it immediately. I remember sitting down at lunch that very day and opening it, and it's just so immediate, his storytelling. By this point he was very confident in his ability to pull you in with the smallest of details. And then so that was my first one, and I'm not sure how many books there were then between Midnight Falcon and finally Stormrider.
I think just one.
Just one, but I mean, how many my family bought me.
Oh, gotcha.
I was still a preteen or a young teenager at the time, so I was not in control of my purchasing. And I just, every single book that I came across, I just devoured them. And I'd always been reading fantasy. My father is a fan of those classics like Wheel of Time and Tad Williams, but I liked it, but it didn't move me the same way. So I bounced around in genres a lot at the time, but there was something about the way he builds characters and worlds and emotion with so efficiently and quickly that everything I read moved me. But Stormrider, for whatever reason, it was always meant to be that was the one book for me that when I finally got it, it felt like such a victory. And then it's such an incredible story, and the ending of it is so powerful, and it just all of it is so good. So I have everything, but still that one book is the one that made the biggest impact.
That's a fascinating story. And the book which you first got, like Sword in the Storm, not Sword in the Storm, sorry,
Midnight Falcon.
That's an incredible story as well. It's
a good one. Bane the Bastard. And I think for me at the time, because the fantasy that my father read was always about people who were confident and who knew what they were doing, and were generally good and made good choices. But Gemmell was the first fantasy novel that I personally read where I could feel like I could understand how flawed these people were, and I could relate to the mistakes that they made and the anger, especially Bane. I can't pinpoint exactly why I was so angry at the time. Maybe it's just because I was a teenager, but Bane is so beautifully angry at the beginning of that story. And it's so moving to watch him heal from that by the end of the book. And I think that was probably what changed things for me. Just the way he acknowledges emotion was not something I had encountered in fantasy until him. And the way he acknowledges flaws in Conovar and the things that he's done. He unites his people, but also he does some horrible things in a fit of rage. And I hadn't seen that before in anyone except villains. And it just rang so true to me, where we all are kind of trying our best, but we all kind of fall apart now and then. And what we do after is what's important. And that is a message that he really seemed to hold to, that I appreciated.
He does. And I think there's a quote of his as well, no matter the choice, you always live with the consequences, some of that. You are absolutely spot on. He had a way of writing humane characters, even the good ones and the bad ones, and of course the conflicted ones, like Bane was, the early prince of Bronze was in the Legend book as well. His books are so different from Tad Williams' Memory, Sorrow and Thorn, or Robert Seal of Time. Those were just sprawling epics. His were more streamlined. Here's a plot, here's a character, and you're thrust to take almost immediately. There's no waiting.
And yet he still tackles the same kind of giant world building, where some of the conflicts are against gods that will wipe out the human race in the same way as the big epics, but it's more focused, and it's more relatable, in my humble opinion. That it just touches you differently. And when he passed away, I stopped reading fantasy for a while, because I couldn't find anyone who did that. And then when I came back, it was just chance that I was in the fantasy section, just because I missed it. And I was wondering what I had missed for nearly 10 years. And I picked up Anthony Ryan's book, Bloodsong. And in the acknowledgements at the beginning of Bloodsong, he says that he would like to thank David Gemmell for inspiring him to write. And so it was it was meant to be. Once again, I was meant to come back. And I've been in fantasy ever since Bloodsong. So
that is such an incredible story, because you're right. Anthony Ryan's Bloodsong is the one book which I felt is the closest to what Gemmell would have ever written, or at least any other author besides Gemmell could have written. Did you know it was self-published before?
Yeah, I found that out this year. That I didn't know that at the time, but he started self-pub, and I guess they picked him up pretty quickly.
Oh yeah.
And and it's true. It felt like, and there's some things in Bloodsong where he has a pass through some country, and he's named it after Skelm Pass, just and stuff like that was so moving and so comforting, and it felt like I had come home to where I belonged in the genre. And I'm really glad I did, because from that I got to meet Josiah Bancroft and Michael Fletcher, and everybody in the self-publishing industry. And it just once again, Gemmell is the gateway to the rest of my life. And it's really neat that Anthony Ryan just so happened to put that in his acknowledgements at the beginning of the book. So it
was meant to be.
That
is such a fascinating story. Because I remember he was self-published in 2010-11. We happened to my co-reviewer and I, we reviewed it when it was self-published. It blew us away. It was, in fact, if I'm not wrong, in the Fantasy Book Critics top 50 debuts of the last decade, it was our number. It is that.
For sure, absolutely. It's an incredible, and it is very much a love letter to fantasy as Gemmell wrote it, where it is a big scale conflict and big scale war, but it's very human. I owe him a lot for bringing me back.
We will talk about Wherein Sorna later as well.
Yeah.
Get back to Stormrider. So here's the fun thing, technically it's like it's the second book of the second duology in the series. It's like the last book. What made you enjoy it much more than see the other previous books? Because if I'm not wrong, the duology books are like more of epic fantasy, but the latter two, Stormrider and Ravenheart, I believe, they're more of like fantasy as well, if I'm not wrong.
That's right. The Sword in the Storm and the Night Falcon are very are more traditional in their setting. It's very much the Celts versus the Romans, but fantasy. And Bane spends some time as a gladiator, and it's very familiar, and it's brilliantly executed in that familiarity. And then Ravenheart and Stormrider, it seems to be about the 1700s, but I could be wrong. So yeah, like you said, flintlock, and I'm not sure if it was the technology. I think it was my first flintlock fantasy novel. And so that was really unique and amazing. And then also how beautifully Celtic it is was really special. But then the complexity of the relationship between Gaze and his father really swept me away. And then the end. I don't know if we're talking spoilers, but the way that book ends is it's so heartbreaking, but absolutely the right ending. And I think that's the first time I'd ever seen an ending that was so bold, and it's almost unhappy, except it's perfect. And I think that was the first time I'd seen a story that dared to break your heart so completely, while also giving you a victory. And I think that's probably what makes it the most memorable for me.
Well, that you brought up a pretty fascinating kind of another question. So the funny part is with both these books, Ravenheart and Stormrider, their endings heartbreaking, to say the least. And you could perhaps make an argument, as to which book's ending is more of of a heartbreaker, the one in Ravenheart.
It's true.
Or the one in Stormrider. I'm not saying that you're wrong and think no.
Oh no, yeah, I agree.
I just want to tease that out.
The order that I read them, for whatever reason, I don't remember how many books I read between Midnight Falcon and Stormrider, but I know I read Stormrider before Ravenheart. So when you read Stormrider, you know how Ravenheart ends, so it didn't take me by surprise the same way. So that's probably part of why it was more memorable. However, that being said, I agree that the ending of Ravenheart is equally traumatizing in the most incredible way. And I think that what draws me back to those two books over and over again is how it's about sacrifice, and it's about self-sacrifice for your family and for humanity and for the people that you love. And it's so moving just to think about it, what he puts you through, what he puts the readers through to get to that end. And it couldn't end any other way. It had to be that way. So yeah, those two books are just amazing what they can do. Sometimes when I reread Stormrider, because I know what's going to happen, I find myself getting emotional several chapters in advance. Like when the Weird gives Mulgrave the bullet.
Yep.
that's when I start. I can't hold myself together after that. I have to take a break because I know what's going to happen. So it's just an incredible book.
It is, and you mentioned that scene. Like there's no foreshadowing. Like you kind of get a hint. Like there's the weird kind of tells Mulgrave like that you'll know when to use it, sort of, so as to speak.
Yeah.
But there's no foreshadowing. But that now that you know, it hits you.
Now that you know. Yeah.
For me, I cannot read I cannot not read Ravenheart's ending and cry. Like I don't know why.
Yep.
The ending, like no matter 20 years in now, I'm still rereading it sometimes.
Yeah.
It'll make me cry. The Troy trilogy, as we were talking about a little bit earlier.
Oh yeah.
That book's ending, even though it's not as bittersweet as this, but it still makes me cry.
Even for Troy, reading the forward from Stella makes me cry, because she mentions how for Legend, he wrote Legend waiting for results to see if he was ill or not, and he had decided that if he was not ill, then Dressdale Knock would fall, or if he was ill, then Dressdale Knock would fall, and that would be the end of his writing. But if he wasn't, then they would survive, and he would maybe see about this writing thing. And then 30 books later, the city has to fall because that's how the story goes. And so reading her acknowledgement, just kind of talking about that, makes me emotional. So then never mind the rest of the book. I have to be ready. I have to be emotionally ready to read that book. Which I mean is a tribute to how brilliantly they pulled it off together.
They did. All of his books, and you're right. Like there was, even though he started out with Legend, you could see as the years and decades grew by, he became a more seasoned and refined writer.
Oh yeah.
Like the early Drenai books were good, but they seem more like templates, because the book in the 90s were like even better, and the 2000s were just like they would hit you with all the emotions.
Oh yeah. And his background as a journalist, I think, helped him kind of identify exactly how much information you need to understand the world building, but never does it interfere with the flow of the story. Never does it feel like it's too much, because he has this incredible understanding of the weight of words and how to deliver them, so that whenever you read any one book in any of the series, you feel like you've stepped into a history that exists somewhere. It feels like you could pick up a history book and learn about all of this, but it's not there. It's somewhere in his imagination, and that's the kind of world building that I always hoped that I would hit when I was writing. Just kind of that balance of, not too much, but just enough that there's more than what's in the story.
His worlds feel real. Like he was a fan of Michael Moorcock, so I that's why we kind of have I don't want to say multiverse, because that term has become popular, but it was you had multiple worlds in his, he never made it clear like how they were all connected, but the Sipstrasse stones, because you had some sort of between those books and the Parmenian books, then there was some sort of connection with the Drenai books and the Rigante, but of course you could
they mention it in the Midnight Falcon too. Somebody mentions that there's echoes of each world, and so he really touched on that in a way that it felt like it could be out there somewhere, and if we reach far enough, we could find it.
I hope that's true, because if these worlds feel so real, those people feel so real. So I really wish.
Oh, they do.
They do. If it were to be true, that would be awesome. All right. Sorry, didn't mean, I don't want to keep you wallowing in emotion. Talk a little bit more about the Rigante series, because I want to get your viewpoints as a writer, because, yes, you are a fan first, but you're also a writer. The previous books aside, and other different series, he's tried different things. With the Rigante series, like we talked about, it combines epic fantasy, but then also has shades of flintlock fantasy. you mentioned the Celtic, influences. I feel like there's like a lot of Scottish and Celtic mythology
Yes.
dragged in, and then there's little tiny aspects of even like high fantasy for that matter, because you have gods who can potentially do certain things. So
yeah.
What are your thoughts from a writerly viewpoint about all of the series? Again, so compact, so many things, but only 4 books.
Yeah, well, I think again it goes to that history as a journalist set him off at a really good base of how much you can say before you lose people's attention, and how much you need to say in order to make them feel like they know what's going on. So that was a great starting point for him in his career. And then beyond that, there's all those characters that feel so true and so genuine. And if you read the interviews with him, he talks about how there's always one character in every book who's a tribute to his stepfather. The protective Bill. And
yep.
Yeah. And then so for Ravenheart and Stormrider, it's Kaelin's I don't know, not quite stepfather, but his uncle, I think.
Yeah.
In Stormrider, or in Sword in the Storm, it's Conovar's stepfather again.
Yes, stepfather again. Yes, you're right.
Rue. And so, and I sense that he does the same thing for other characters, where these people feel so real because I think they're very real to him, and he builds them on familiarity, so that when we reach into the stories, we can feel that human connection. And then he's got magic that feels accessible. It's technically kind of a soft magic system because he never actually explains it. And then he's also got just a little bit of faith in it, especially in those books that he talks about the source, the source of all things. And he's just built it in such a way that we can see ourselves in our own world in him and in his world, that makes it really easy to connect. And then he has an incredible eye for pacing, where his climaxes are incredible, but his slow moments are, you can't look away. He seems to break a book down into thirds, where the first third is the build. He's letting you know where you are and who you need to know and what the magic is like this time. And then and you can read that slowly over the course of a couple of weeks, because he's feeding it to you really gently and keeping you engaged. And then there's the middle third, where he's raising the tension and things are starting to get stressful, and you're starting to see where the story is going to go. And then there's the last third, which I almost always read in a day or two, because you can't put it down, because he's thrown the pacing out. It's time to go. We're racing to the end now, and things are scary, and you're not sure who's going to survive. But he also respects death. It's not a cheap thing for him. It's not. He doesn't throw bodies down to be shocking or to to prove how dangerous it all is. Death is treated as a thing that. Yes, it's inevitable, but the people left behind have to feel it. And I think that helps the stress in a way, because it's like, no one is necessarily safe, but you also know that he's going to respect your emotions and he's going to give you time to feel it. And I think that's really brilliant. And then, I mean, I could go on forever. Like his characters are so human, and I think that's the most important thing.
That was a brilliant point you brought. I never really thought about the whole thirds part, but that's your right insight. I feel like you can break that down that way. For me, it's just like it's the story. It's like I cannot stop. But no, Sorry, go on. I didn't.
All of my favorite authors do that same thing. So he does it, and then when I left fantasy, I was into thrillers and cop dramas and legal stuff. And so my next favorite writer is Dennis Lehane. He does. Oh, you know him.
Midnight Mile, and he's very famous.
Moonlight Mile and A Drink Before the War.
Yes, and the movie which Ben Affleck made. Why am I forgetting the name?
Gone Baby Gone.
Gone Baby Gone. Yes, and
Mystic River, when Clint Eastwood did The Drop with Tom Hardy. Yeah, and he was a writer on a TV show called The Wire. Well. Yeah, so he does the same thing. He does the thirds, where the first third is you're establishing the story, and you can read it at your leisure because you need to take your time to get into the world. The middle third is the elevation of tension, and you read it pretty quickly, and then the last third you'll read it in a day because he won't let go of you. And so when I was figuring out how to pace novels, I took a lot of notes from those two gentlemen. They are very good at parsing those three out, and you can almost, like, if you were to take a book and split it into thirds by how many pages there are, those beats hit almost exactly. And it's a brilliant way to keep people hooked.
Oh yeah. You bring up a very fascinating point because, a lot of fantasy fans, I would say, I don't want to say writers, but fantasy fans, they don't read thriller and mystery. I actually started from thriller and mystery, which is why I kind of knew the names. And the reason why I was looking to the side is because literally on this side, I have both, Gone Baby Gone and its sequel. We're right over here. I was trying to find them. But no, you're right. The funny thing is with thrillers, the books are always anywhere from 50 to 80K. And so the plot has to have condensed in those. And you're right, David Gemmell's books were also lesser than 100, not all of them, but most of his novels were kind of just below the 100K range, which is why you kind of see the similarities between his books and the thriller books as well. Though, I would say Dennis Lehane is not really a pacey writer, I mean, compared to fantasy writers, yes, he seems pacey, but so nuanced.
Well, he has some historical fiction. He has a book called The Given Day. It takes place in 1919 in Boston. So he covers the Boston police riots, and he covers the explosion of a molasses tanker, and he also covers the Spanish flu. So it's kind of a content warning for these days. But that book is the closest he comes to that feeling of fantasy, where it meanders a little bit more slowly, and it does the big world building because 100 years ago he has more room to expand his storytelling. He's got kind of an epic feeling for main characters because he bounces between several characters, and it's a family saga, so it's got three brothers who are all at different stages in their lives. Danny is the main character. He's a police officer who, and it's just I know it's not fantasy, but I feel like historical fantasy fans would really like it. Yes, there's no magic, and I'm sorry, but it's paced and it's written in a similar way that. And it's got that same brilliant character work where these men and women that he writes about are so flawed and so messy emotionally, but so when they triumph at the end, it truly feels like a victory. So those are my biggest influences as a storyteller.
Pretty big writer.
Yeah, I know.
And for those fantasy fans who don't know, Dennis Lehane is considered one of the best thriller mystery writers out there alive. If you have seen the movie or heard of the movie Gone Baby Gone, that is his, which was adapted by Ben Affleck, starring Casey Affleck and Michelle Monaghan. Again, I'm still trying to find the books over here because they're literally over here somewhere. Never mind.
Yeah, I didn't think to bring my Dennis Lehane out. I have Coronado. It's his short stories. and the first one in that is called Running Out of Dog.
Mhm.
And it's everything Dennis Lehane in 20,000 words, and it's just emotionally devastating, but it's so good. So he's something.
He's something, definitely. I do want to ask you, besides Dennis Lehane and David Gemmell, are there any other authors who kind of share the top billing in your mind?
Another that comes to mind is her name is Sharon K. Pedman.
Mm-hmm.
She wrote historical fiction, quite medieval. So she has some about some of the Welsh kings, and she has she wrote about Richard the Lionheart and the Crusades, and those books are really moving and heartbreaking. So she would be, I would say, the last of my big influences before I jumped onto Twitter and got to know people. Where she writes these massive stories, and they're a little bit harder to get into because they're very historical and they're very dense. But her series about Richard the Lionheart and the couple that comes before it about his parents are really they're kind of a study in all the ways that people react badly to having power, and they're very good. If you can, the language is much stiffer. She's very much a historian. So I was reading an interview with her where she was talking about how there were rumors about how I think it was Richard's father, Henry, slept with Richard's wife. And she was like, oh, what an incredibly juicy piece of drama that could have been. But there's no evidence that actually happened. So alas, I couldn't write about it. So she's very historical in her approach, where she must prove to her satisfaction that these things happen before she's willing. But she does that same thing where she's talking about kings and queens and battles of power that seems so incredibly petty, but then at the same time you really invest with her telling of these people who are pretty tragic in their own way, but you can feel like I don't know that I'd do any better in that situation. So she was really she kind of bridged the gap for me between fantasy and literature when I was looking for writers to fill the gaps that David Gemmell left. So I think those three would be a fair, Venn diagram of my influences.
But completely
and then
apart.
There's me right in the middle. Oh yeah, absolutely. Three completely different genres. But what the three of them do is very human stories. No matter how far away from our experience they get, the stories are still very human.
Now, because you mentioned these things, I want to highlight one character from the book, because his presence is felt throughout both the books, both Ravenheart and Stormrider. There is this character, or he's not a POE character for those viewers who haven't read it. There's a character called Moidart, and Krystle, please correct me if I'm pronouncing it wrong, because I've always pronounced it.
No, I think that's right. The Moidart,
okay.
Yeah.
The Moidart. He is shown to be a lord. He is shown to be an oppressive lord, but then through things that we see from other characters' POV, we get this massively conflicted view of him. Since you mentioned all these writers, great writers who wrote these great conflicted characters, or at least characters who touched on both good and evil, what did you feel about him? What did you think about him as a character itself?
For our modern audience, if Stormrider had been about the Moidart, that book would have been grimdark. Because he is he's a piece of work, and him and Huntsecker, his henchmen, are my favorite. It's just another incredible commentary of what power does to people, and how quickly it corrupts. But ultimately, he is redeemed by the love he has for his son. And it's made clear pretty quickly in those stories that he doesn't actually know for sure if his son is his son. And it drives a lot of his internal conflict as a father. But ultimately, though he by any measure fails as a father, his love for his son saves him, even though he might not even be worthy of that saving. And that message was incredibly powerful. That when he accepts that saving, it's such a victory, and it's so moving.
It is.
But yeah, he's not a good guy. He's even worse. Reading Stormrider first, I didn't notice quite how bad he was, because we're coming in at the end of his redemption. But in Ravenheart, he is the villain of that book. He drives the background of the conflict, but then in Stormrider, the conflict expands beyond him, and he by accident is on the right side with the good guys. And he has a big dialogue about how angry he is about being on this side, because he thinks that these people are vermin, that that the country would be better without them. And yet, because the enemies of these people have come against his son, now he has to fight with them. And it's just, he's so good. It's such a good character. It's such an amazing commentary on power and oppression and racism and classism and it's and yet even he is redeemed by the end. It's brilliant. It's brilliantly done.
It is. Now that you mention it, it blew my mind that the Moidart and Huntsecker, if it was story was written from their point, it would be grim. It would be so grim.
It would be.
It'd be like it would be above. I would say Mark Lawrence's the Thorns, the Broken Throne trilogy, because it's like, if you thought George Antrak was bad, wait till you read the Moidart and Huntsecker with the skip.
Huntsecker. Yeah. And I mean, as it is, those books toe the line. They approach it. They're not grimdark, but they get close, because it's very honest about the weight and the cost of war and conflict. And it doesn't matter if you're a good person, you might still die. So they get very close to that. Whatever it is that grimdark is doing, I think he started the ball rolling towards that, because his characters are morally ambiguous. Gaze makes some terrible choices in that the last third, where he begins killing innocent people because he's angry. So I think he started the ball rolling of people asking, is war noble? When is it okay? And what does it do to us? And so writers after him built momentum, and then we ended up with grimdark. But you could rewrite that book from the Moidart's point of view, and it would be up there with Mr. Fletcher. Sure.
It's one of those things like, I really wish, if it was possible, that, had he lived for a few years more, I only wonder, like, what other books would he have written? Did you know about this? He had plans to write a second Bane book, like, which was going to explore, because, in between the 800 time gap,
Yeah.
what happened. So how Bane broke, the city of stone. He vanquished him back.
Yeah, he sacked Stone, and then he brought his people home.
Yep.
And then I guess a lot happened in between then. There was also from the Dry series, he wanted to do the War of the Twins.
Yes.
Mentioned.
Yes.
Yeah, I do wonder about where he would have gone next, but.
And the third Skilganon book, after what?
Oh yeah, Skilganon. Oh,
Skilganon, the third book.
Those books it's so good. Yeah,
there's so many things like, and I've read in his interviews that he also wanted to write like a historical fiction, similar to Troy, but of apparently some general, but who was thought as a hero, but he thought he wasn't a hero, so he wanted to explore. He never revealed. Well, general was, or which era was it going to be set in, but I think it was going to be either Greek or Roman, because he was really invested in that era.
That's what I mean. He was stepping very close to grimdark late in his career, where he was examining what the weight of being a hero even looks like. So yeah, that it's a shame we lost him when he did, but we're all impermanent, so.
I know. Well, I like to think that maybe in some world of ours, with a different world where there's echoes of ours, maybe
somewhere he's still writing.
He's still writing his brilliant stories.
Yeah.
Sorry, I don't mean to ramble.
Well, I mean, that's part of the fun that we're both so invested.
We are. I do want to talk about the other books as well. Besides the Rigante, what other books of David Gemmell are some of your other favorites, and why?
I think there's so many good answers. Echoes of a Great Song is one that stays with me. That book was really beautiful and very tragic, and it tackles themes of colonialism and a post-apocalyptic event where the world that they lived in tilted on its axis, and now the civilization is enduring an ice age. But there's magic. And the magic is different from anything else that he ever wrote. That book very much stands alone. Like it doesn't feel connected to his world, except that it's so truly his voice. And I can't remember the names of the main characters of that one, except the bad one was my favorite, Vidor.
Yes, the two souls ones, right?
Yeah, no, that was Dark Moon.
Oh, so then maybe
Dark Moon has Tarantino and Dace.
Yes. Sorry. I'm mixing this up as well.
I'm gonna look it up now because I'm sure if I say the main character's name, you'll remember. But that one was very mournful in a way that most of his work isn't. And that was another one where sacrifice. I can't talk and type at the same time.
Oh no, that's okay. I'm also trying to find out the name, because I remember I've read this one, but I can't remember. It's not one of my favorites. So because of course, like you said, it's quite dark, like much darker than what
it is. Yeah, that one gets really close to being a tragedy. But I think that's why I liked it at the time, just because it's really heavy and it makes you think. So that's a good one. And then my favorite of the I can't find it on Goodreads. I have it under my desk somewhere, but you don't want me digging around under there. It'll be there forever. But Legend of the Death Walker, excuse me, is probably one of my favorite of the Dress books, where man, that book was good.
Yeah.
He's not even a main character in that book. That book is more about
Cybin?
oh, what's his name?
The poet?
No. Talisman.
Talisman, yes. I remember it was something with a T.
That book is his story. And Druss, I mean, he has at least as much page time as Talisman does, but that book is very much about Talisman's journey among his people, and that book is so good.
It's
I'm trying to it's been so long since I read that one, but it's just, I think that's my favorite of the Druss books, with the exception of White Wolf, about Skilganon the Damned.
Yep.
And again, Druss is a supporting character, but the magic in Skilganon's books is a lot of fun.
Yeah.
He gets really audacious and bold with the magic in White Wolf, and the swords that he has. The cursed swords,
the swords of day and night.
Those were really cool. So I definitely, most of my favorites are later in his career, where he was writing larger books with bigger storytelling, and trying to think of what else. I mean, they're all good, and then of course the Troy novels. I really like The Lion of Macedon, about Parmenion.
That is an underrated classic of his. I don't know if more people have read it, but they need to read it. I know, because it's one of those. I don't know if you knew this story, but apparently he had written it as like a historical fiction, and his publishers came back and said, "We need you to insert magic in it. We cannot just publish this." And so, which is why there's that odd bit of magic which is inserted right kind of at 1/3. And it still works. Like that's his to make it work. And then it's got Philip of Macedon in it as a friend, and it really shows how versatile he was, where he could pick up just about any era, and even if he had to add magic in later, he was so good at it. And he was good at writing magic that you could believe, without needing to understand, which suits my taste really well, because if it needs a rule book that I have to remember, I can't. And I admire writers and readers who can, but my attention span is terrible. So, but he had that balance of, it's believable and it's dangerous, but also you don't necessarily need to understand it to appreciate it. And I really liked that in his writing. Yeah, and coming back to your point, I think the reason why we find this about in the latter books as to why the world is slowly discovering magic, and there is no complete manual, as to speak, because the world itself has kind of gone through an apocalypse back in the past, the Rigante world as well, and so which is why the magic is it's like people in different parts of the world can see different parts of the whole thing, and that's why they only know pieces of it, which is why there's incompletion to it. So the Nadir have their own beliefs, the Chiatse have their own beliefs, the Ranai do whatever they want to do, and then of course there's witches and everybody. And I think I'm forgetting the name of the witch woman. He has this witch woman who keeps on the evil witch woman, and it's Helga, who she's almost never named, but she's there throughout all of the Ranai books, almost taunting Druss and everybody else. But I'm forgetting her name.
I don't remember.
Sorry.
I don't remember.
I do want to ask you this, since this is a pure hypothetical, but let's say if David had offered you the choice of, he would set a series or write a book in any era, that you as a fan could get to choose, what would you choose and why?
Oh, that's a good question. He did Greek for us, which was fantastic, and we got Alexander the Great. Oh, that book was so good. And then We got flintlock fantasy. I'd like to see pirates, I think. That's one thing. He sometimes we get close in some of the stories, but it's not something he ever really committed to. And I think that's one thing that, as a fantasy fan, I think that would have been a lot of fun. David Gemmell's take on pirates.
Yes.
Why, thank you.
That is a fantastic, because I don't think pirates are explored that much in fantasy. I mean, we have our book and two, and of course we have a previous SPFPO winner who did a book on pirates as well, Rob J. Hayes. But there's political fantasy is not that explored. So great choice, Krystle.
Thank you.
If you ever had any plans, but this is like, it just blew my mind. Like, you some of the come up with.
Because of the era that I write in, it is something that I would like to do kind of outside the main series, but maybe inside the main series, because once there's war, that's when pirates do their best work. So, maybe.
Yeah, okay. Well, fingers crossed. I don't have anything else, because I know we can go on talking about David Gemmell.
Yes, we could.
But I do want to ask you about your book, and I want to ask you, how are you doing amidst all the SPFPO final tension? For our viewers, it is this book, which is called Legacy of the Brightwash. It is Krystle's debut book. It is a fantastic story. It is chunky for those who love fantasies on the chunkier side. It is a mix of a mystery, a gaslamp fantasy, epic fantasy, and then of course magic, which becomes more clear as the story goes ahead. The characterization is wonderful. Tashue, I believe, and Krystle, please correct me if I'm wrong.
Yep.
Is one of the main characters, and there's other characters as well. He's conflicted, as are David Gemmell's characters. So
yeah. Yeah, it's definitely, it was always meant to be a love letter to all of those favorite genres that, as I was reading and writing through my career, well, through my practice, I would write fantasy because I do love it as a genre, and what we can do in fantasy that we can't do in contemporary. And I would write and I would try, but then I would miss writing about Tashue, because back when I first started writing about him, he was in a contemporary setting. So I would switch back and I would write a book about him, and I would spend time with him in his car. And then I would miss fantasy, so I would give up and I would go back. And so eventually, after I had my last child, I wanted to come back to writing. I really missed it. But I didn't want to choose anymore. I didn't want to have to do this back and forth, one or the other. So I was like, well, I'll make Tashue fantasy. And so I pulled him into the 1800s, because I don't think he would have fit in, more traditional settings. And so by doing that, it let me explore what I love about both sides of the, David Gemmell's work, and then Dennis Lehane's work, and how those things can be brought together, where we can have magic, and we can have the big world building, and we can have discussions about civilization that isn't specifically ours, but then there's also the those really human stories that David Gemmell's able to do, or Dennis Lehane's able to do, with mystery and trying to understand your own society and your own city. And it's just, it had to be both if I was going to make a career out of it. If I was going to do this, I didn't want to have to choose anymore. And that's where this story came from. I decided not to choose, and I just picked all of my favorite things and smashed it together. Fortunately, some people think it works, so that's good enough for me.
Hey, it is an SPFPO finalist. Nobody can take that away from
Yeah.
And it is indeed a special book. I happen to love the characters and I happen to love the world because that is, like you said, you have smash characters with the mystery setting, the rich characterization, because you really feel Tashue's world, his feelings, his thoughts, everything, even the smell of the whiskey and the cigarette.
Yeah.
I love that you included that every once in a while. Lastly, I know I don't want to keep you any, on the weekend, any bits here as well, but I do want to ask you, what are you currently writing on? And potentially, if you can reveal, what is your release schedule looking like for the next couple of years, based on what you're writing on?
So I'm doing a revision of the next book. So that's Legacy of Brick and Bone. I spent a little bit of time writing in the wrong direction. But now I'm refocused back on what the story needs to be, and that's Tashue and Stella dealing with, like David Gemmell says, it doesn't matter what the choice you make, even if it's the right choice, you have to face the consequences. So this book is very much about that, where they've made choices after what they've learned, and they have to decide what comes next. And so that's going well. I have it with one of my now dear friends, a sensitivity reader, who's been incredibly helpful, making sure Tashue is the best he can be, as a character who's indigenous to his society. So that's going well. It's going very well. I want to get it out this year.
Okay.
And then, so also there's a story called Coyote, about a character that comes up in Brick and Bone, who has a lot to say about magic, but also he has a lot to say about the breeding program and what that looks like from within. And I think his story is really important, which is why I'm working on it as well. And I'd like to release that. I don't know if I can get it out this year, but certainly early next year, just because it won't fit in Brick and Bone, but his story is really important just to give context to everything. And then we have Virginia Mclean put together her incredible anthology, Alchemy of Sorrow, that's due to release in, I want to say, in the fall. And my story for that is called The Paperweight Watch. It's from Ishmael's point of view, when he was much younger. And that one was really, that one was very personal, because, the theme is grief, and, we write what we know as writers. And so his experience, although he's not me and I don't live in a fantasy world, his experience with what he goes through is very personal. And I'm looking forward to it, because I think fantasy has so much space to talk about emotion, because we deal with really heavy themes with conflict and everything. And I'm so pleased with the support we got from the community for that Kickstarter. I blown away by how enthusiastic people were. So that'll be coming out. I know Clayton and Michael are working on their projects right now, but we want to continue the world of Norelska Groans. I think we're going to clear a little bit of chaos off of our schedules, and then hopefully we'll be able to come back together. Scheduling 3 different people is a bit of a nightmare, but I really like the world that they build. I was fortunate enough to beta read Norelska as they were writing it. And so when they were finished, they decided that I was coming in on the next one, and I was very happy to meet them. So hopefully we're able to schedule some time that we can get back to working on that one. I know Michael just finished his trilogy for Blackstone Heart, so I think he's taking a break working on a brand new project, and then hopefully. And then Clayton is moving and shaking in the world. He's doing a lot of really, really interesting things that should be coming out soon. So we're hopeful that we'll get back together. And that's about all I can say.
That's perfectly awesome. Thank you for sharing that. And for our viewers, Mike, the other two lovely people she's talking about is Michael Fletcher and Clayton Snyder, who have jointly written another SPFQ finalist, that is Norelska Groans, which coincidentally was Fantasy Critic's pick for going into the finals. So we were excited.
Yeah, I'm very proud of them, and I'm very happy for them on that book. They watching them come together was I learned a lot, certainly, and I probably they did too about themselves. And I know Clayton has really grown as a writer since I met him. So it even though it's not my book, it still feels very personal. So I'm really pleased for them that they've gotten so far.
Whenever you folks decide to collaborate and write a chapter in the world of Norelska, it would be one of my, at least for, from Fantasy Critics perspective, not just for me, for Lucas as well. I know Lucas is a huge fan of Michael Fletcher, and he also loved this book. For both of us, it would be one of our most anticipated titles.
No pressure or anything.
No pressure or anything. It's just, we are fans. We love it. So sorry about this, but it's like, it's hard to contain our enthusiasm. You could see it from my face as you're describing it, my face was lighting up. So I'm also looking forward to Legacy of Brick and Bone and Coyote, because especially Coyote, because from the way what you've described, it sounds dark and exciting, and especially because it's set in your world and what you describe. It's set from the viewpoint of, from the inside of the experiment. So I want to. It'll be great to see that as well.
Yes, Ozra is he's a tragic character, but I hope, as dark as I ever get, I always want to keep hope as a core of these people's lives, because I think our ability to love one another is what saves us in the end. And I want to hold to that. That's no matter how dark I get, I will promise that they will save each other, whoever the story is about. So that's me. There has to be hope, or else it's too much.
Well, that is a solid thought, and especially what's going on in this in the world right now. We all, when we are turning inwards, we are looking to our books to kind of give us something more, and I believe your book provides that.
Yeah, community. I think being part of the writing community in this time has been really. It feels like what I was just saying, and how we, together we can survive. So. All
right. Well, thank you again for this lengthy conversation. I really want to
thank you very much
giving me your time on a Saturday. I know you're busy, so
it's a full house here. Yeah.
Still, my thanks to your family as well for giving you the leeway to talk to me. I will be posting all of Krystle's links below. Her website, her Amazon link, her Goodreads link, as a review of Legacy of the Brightwash, so you can check it out. By the time this video gets posted, it will be close to a month, since it'll be a month out until SPFPO ends. So we are wishing you all the very best as well, Krystle.
Oh, thank you very much.
So thank you once again, and
thank you.
Bye.